Good Sunday evening. I'm First Alert Meteorologist Melissa Thomas here for your News 13 educational moment for the evening. Today we're going to be talking about weather map symbols, because if you want to understand what's going on in the atmosphere, when you're looking at a weather map, you're going to want to know what these mean. So let's get started. We're going to start with the cold fronts. So we have this boundary of cooler air being transported south, and you can tell which way that cold air is being moved by these notches on the boundary line. So these half triangle notches are facing downward, so they're moving cold air from the north to the south. And cold fronts are typically symbolized by the color blue. And they don't have to be, these fronts and all the different fronts we're going to talk about in boundaries, they don't have to be oriented horizontal. They can be vertical, slanted, horizontal, and the way that you tell which direction the air mass is being transported is by which way those notches are facing. So the cold air behind this one is being transported south. Then we have the warm fronts, symbolized by the warm colors of the red. So we have the warm air coming up from the Gulf, and in this example, I have it placed horizontally, and those notches are half circles, and they represent warm fronts, are the half circles, and they're being transported from the south to the north because those half circles are oriented to face the north, so they're transporting warm air to the north. The next one we'll look at is the stalled boundary, when there's no real air mass and its associated temperature dominating. So you've got some warm air going north, you got some cool air going south, but they're all kind of working around each other, and that boundary is not being shifted one way or the other, north or south. It's just stalled, it's hanging there. And you can see that in similar vertical orientations as well, where the front is just hanging around and not really moving anywhere. The next one we'll look at is the occluded front, where you have both warm and cold air moving in a certain direction. In this example, we have it horizontal, moving north, and we know it's moving north because of the notches are facing the northern side of the boundary, and we have cool air and we have warm air, symbolized by the half circles you see on the purple boundary and the half triangles. So that air is a little bit of both cool and warm air moving northward. And occluded fronts are usually purple. The next one we'll look at is the one that you don't see too very often on weather maps that we discuss as broadcasters, but it's one that forecasters pay attention for when they're looking at weather maps and observations in different locations and what that information is telling them. If they see information that's saying, hey, there is a dry line associated by the brown notches, or by the brown color and the half circle notches, the dry air on one side moving into a moist air mass, that's significant for forecasters because dry air is more dense and moist air is more buoyant and more unstable, so it wants to rise up into the atmosphere a lot more easier. It's more buoyant. And that dry air, if there's a dry line and there's dry air that's moving towards that moist air and forcing it up, you're forcing an already unstable air mass that wants to rise up in the air and adding that extra instability to the situation. So you usually see thunderstorms along dry lines, and that's forecasters really want, pay attention to those dry lines for that reason. You see thunderstorm activity around areas of dry lines. Now that we've looked at the different map symbols, let's take a look at it on a live weather map. We'll use our Futurecast to see what's going on out there. Cool. We got a little bit of everything. And one thing that I want to highlight is I took bits and pieces of those different boundary lines and gave you examples of them, but typically you'll see them connected around systems, and those systems are low pressure systems and high pressure systems. And on this one, right northwest of Oklahoma City, you see a low pressure, and that low pressure has counterclockwise winds spinning around it. So you can see those winds are helping to transport warm Texas air north into Oklahoma. So there is our associated warm front, the red colors, the half circle notches. And then on the northwestern side of that same low pressure system we're talking about, in just north of New Mexico, you can see a high pressure system, and it has clockwise winds. So looking at those two systems, you can probably see that they're working together to push air southward. And that is pushing cold air south. And would you know, look at it, there's a cold front right there, symbolized by the blue color and the half triangle notches facing the south. So they're moving cold air from the north south into New Mexico. If you look over at Louisiana and Mississippi, we have a stalled front. So in this section, the front really isn't moving any one direction or the other. You've got your warm air drifting north, you've got your cool air drifting south, and it's just hanging right there. And then just north of Panama City, further east, you can see a cold front. And that can be explained by a few things. This low pressure system moving off to the east of the Carolinas, you can see the counterclockwise winds. The air north of that is cooler. So those counterclockwise winds are transporting that colder air down southward and working to move the cold air towards Florida. It is a weak cold front. We will actually continue to warm into this week by Friday, getting close to the 90s. So while there is cold air moving south, this would be considered a weak cold front. It's not going to do too much to our temperatures. As much as we would like some cooler, more springtime temperatures for this time of year, it's going to be feeling quite summer-like after this over the next couple of days. And then the only thing we didn't talk about that is on the screen that I do want to touch on, because it is there, you might see it and be like, what is that? There is a brown dashed line just south of Louisville and between Memphis, and that is an indicator of something called troughing. And in the atmosphere, you have the winds that move in wavy patterns, and I'll just show you an example of it actually. So in the atmosphere, typically in the upper atmosphere, you'll have the winds move in this manner. And there's lots of lines indicating that, which way the wind is moving. So what we were seeing is an indicator of a trough, which is a line down the center of where it dips. And over here is called a ridge, and in the center of that ridge is the center of the ridge, ridging. So troughing and ridging, and that helps to move the wind around the nation. So your winds typically travel from west to east around these troughs like that, or ridge. So around your ridge, you have the clockwise rotation in the upper atmospheres, and then you'll have counterclockwise over here. And that just helps move the air masses around the nation, and when these cold fronts and warm fronts are formed, they're either amplified by those winds or de-amplified, or made stronger or made weaker. So that is a little tour of weather maps, weather symbols, what they mean for the air masses around the nation, how they're being transported, and what directions they're traveling, what colors mean which. Nice little brief exploration of that. I hope you enjoyed it, and we will continue with our educational moments each day. I hope everyone is staying safe and healthy, and until next time.